What I'm really interested in is what Erikson had to say about creativity and the connection between childhood and creativity. And given that his theory is a lifespan development theory, what that might mean to us as adults who are developing for young children. So that's the direction I'm taking. And as Warren said, Patrick Dixon is here. He's going to provide some follow-up comments to my remarks. The last time Patrick and I were together prior to last night was 23 years ago at the University of Wisconsin in Madison at my doctoral defense. And you know, this presentation feels almost as high stakes as that one did. I'm going to have a little magic here or my PhD could turn to dust. So we're going to see if I can pull that off. And because Erikson was very interested in relationships and the mutuality of relationships and context, I thought I'd just quickly kind of retell the story that Warren just told about the connections between all of us. I met Patrick when I was the administrator of the Woodland Montessori School in Madison, Wisconsin. He was the parent of two boys that were coming to the program, was wildly excited about this Apple II computer, couldn't stop talking about what could happen with this computer, convinced us to buy a computer at the school, and the only way we could make that work was that it was in my office part of the time for administration, and then we wheeled it into the classroom to try and see what we could do with that. I happened to mention to Patrick one day that I was really mulling over the possibility of going back to school for my doctorate. The next morning, an application packet for the University of Wisconsin-Madison was on my desk, and the rest is history. There's also a little piece here, Practicing What You Teach, which came from Family Computing, I think, Patrick, which shows Patrick and his two young sons working at a computer. So in the very earliest days of all of this, Warren and my mentor was at this already and thinking hard about these technologies, and then went on to Michigan State University, actually semi-abandoned me just before I was done, but returned in time for my defense. Warren and I met in Pittsburgh to take a ride into Pittsburgh for Fred Rogers' event, started talking about our doctoral programs, and discovered that we had the same advisor. So lots of fun there. And at the very bottom, you can barely see it, but there's a citation from 1987. The first professional publication I had was myself, Karen Borg, and Patrick, Computers in Early Childhood Education, the Journal of Research in Childhood Education. So we go back a long way, and these thoughts about technology have been percolating since then. At AppCamp in 2011, Warren did a presentation, a kind of a speed march through child development theory and what its implications are for media designers. And he talked about Maslow and Skinner, certainly Piaget, Montessori, Vygotsky. But he didn't talk about Erik Erikson. So I've invited Erik to the party. I think he really needs to be here as part of this conversation. Let me just tell you briefly about Erikson Institute and what we're all about. Our values are based on relationship-based education, a commitment to social justice, certainly an awareness of, an honoring of diversity in all its forms. Perhaps related to this conversation this morning, most important is the understanding of the complexity of human development, social development, the context in which children grow, develop, and learn, and then a commitment to high standards and excellence. I think this vision statement of Erikson is particularly pertinent to all of us this morning. Our vision is that every adult who works with young children or on their behalf will be knowledgeable, aware, skilled, and alive to the possibilities of each child's life. I think those last words are really powerful. Alive to the possibilities of each child's life. Well, in your work in children's media, that would be a great mantra as well, right? Stay alive to those possibilities. Erik Erikson's belief in the complexity and resilience of children and in the importance of mutuality in relationships led the founders of the Institute to name it in his honor. When I came to Erikson 3 years ago, I heard this phrase said over and over and over again as the answer to all questions. Well, it all depends. And at first I thought it was a way to dodge answering very difficult questions. Then I've come to realize that it really is about complexity. There are no easy answers when it comes to child development. It does all depend. We have to look at all the factors, look at the environment, look at the social environment, look at the relationships, if we're really going to make a difference in young children's lives. A little of my context, and the context really that we're all operating in right now. I'm the Director of Distance Learning at Erikson Institute. My work for many, many years has been in using technology as tools for teacher education and professional development. More recently, working with the Rogers Center on the NAUIC and Fred Rogers Center Joint Position Statement on Interactive Technology Tools This has been a 2.5-year process. As Warren mentioned, he's been involved in this. I was at the NAUIC conference last week. I still have boot marks up and down my back from being stomped on by the forces of no tech. And particularly as you were talking about an app for very young children, for babies. Boy, that's a hard topic conversation to have at NAUIC right at the moment. But we're working on that. Actually, the final draft of the statement is at NAUIC right now and in final edit. It will go to the Board of Directors Advisory Board in January. We're expecting an early 2012 rollout of that statement. I will be so delighted to have it done because I'm really interested in the implementation of it. Enough fussing about what it should say. Let's get on to what it means or what we should do. So that's important to me. A number of you in the room also have been involved in the Fred Rogers Center Framework for Quality Digital Media for Young Children. And it's really been interesting for me working on both of those things to see the intersection and how one has informed the other. But really the core of both efforts is around grounding this in child development. And who better example of grounding media work in child development than Fred Rogers, who was a student of child development and was very intentional about all of that. And then we had the perfect storm in the last couple of weeks, right? American Academy of Pediatrics comes out with the latest statement, a kind of slightly updated version of their 1999 statement. Those of us who are interested in every device in this room that is not a television scratched our heads and what are we doing in 2011 still only talking about passive television? Do we need to talk about passive television? Yes. Do we only talk about that? I think we missed an opportunity. So that's out there. Warren and Scott and others have been blogging like crazy about that and what we do about that. Common Sense Media, maybe 2 weeks ago, released their report, 0 to 8 Children's Media Use in America, some alarming statistics about how much time young children are spending in front of screens and what that might mean. So it's all important and it's all part of this context for this conversation. And then just last week, the Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop released Taking a Giant Step, a blueprint for teaching young children in a digital age. If you haven't seen that report yet, go to Cooney Center and download that. To me, this is one of those full circle ones, because I started at the top talking about technology for teacher education, and we ended with Cooney Center talking about technology for teacher education and preparing teachers to use technology with young children through the use of technology. I think that's an exciting opportunity, and the need for digital literacy. If there's one thing that we're learning in the NAUIC Fred Rogers process is that we hold teachers in high esteem, but we also recognize that teachers are going to need a lot of help to become more digitally literate and be ready to really do the kinds of things everyone in this room imagines can happen with technology. So we've got some work to do, but we can get on with that. Since I've been a senior fellow at the Rogers Center, I have never given a single presentation where I haven't brought Fred into the room because it's just so powerful to do that. You may know this quote, "I went into television because I hated it so, and I thought there was some way of using this fabulous instrument to be of nurture to those who would watch and listen." Now that's great advice, and I've used this very quote for every speech at NACI in the last 2 years about the position statement. You don't have to love technology to know that we have to figure it out. This is the world, this is the context, right, that young children are living in. These are tools of the culture. It's not okay to not embrace them. We don't have to love them, we do have the responsibility to figure them out, and I think that's very critical to all of us. And then one other thing I learned at the Rogers Center is that back in 1979, Erik Erikson visited St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, along with Fred Rogers, to keynote a symposium on childhood and creativity. And I asked the archivist there, the Arch Abbot had told me many stories about this event, and I asked the archivist at the Rogers Center, can you find me audio of Erik Erikson's presentation? So I want to play you just a little, and I'm hoping this will work.
Well, friends, when one is charged with an evening's presentation on a grand subject such as childhood and creativity, one always more or less systematically looks around for a fitting opening quotation from somebody who ought to know. After extensive search, I finally found one such quotation, and I found it right here on our program. where Fred Rogers is quoted as saying, "At the root of all art and science there exists a gap between what the world is like and what the human creator wishes and hopes for it to be like. Our unique attempt to bridge that gap in each of our lives seems to me to be the essence of the reason for human creativity."
Powerful, right? So we have Erik Erikson quoting Fred Rogers. I think that's pretty amazing. If you've ever been to London, and some of you are working in London, then you've been in the tube and you've seen the signs, "Mind the gap." This is our responsibility. We have to mind the gap, right? If we accept that this gap is there, then it falls to us to mind it, to take care of it.
Just for the record, we have Chip Donohue quoting Erik Erikson quoting Fred Rogers.
Not bad.
And then we're going to have Patrick Dixon quoting Chip Donohue quoting Erik Erikson quoting Fred Rogers. This only happens at Dustin.
Yeah, there's no place else you're going to get this kind of entertainment.
Not easy to do this, folks.
Again, sensitive to time, just a couple of highlights, because I think it is interesting and it's important to understand context again, right? So we look at Erikson's lifespan, 1902 to 1994. His father was Danish. His father abandoned the family before he was born. He never grew up with his birth father. His mother was Jewish. She married a physician. He is famous for the phrase identity crisis, but he had one of his own. And what does that tell us about the implications of your own experience on the work that you later do, right? When he went to Temple School, he was teased because he looked very Nordic. He looked very Danish like his father. When he went to grammar school, he was teased for being Jewish. And he didn't feel like he fit in either place. I think that's interesting. He became an art teacher early in his career in Vienna at a school started by Anna Freud that got him involved in all of that thinking. He earned a certificate from the Maria Montessori School. I think that's interesting how all these lines keep crossing. The Psychoanalytic Institute in Vienna as well. Despite not holding a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree. You with me on this? No degrees. He held teaching positions at Harvard Medical School, UC Berkeley, Yale, Austin Riggs Center for Advanced Studies, and on and on. Quite remarkable, right? When you think about it today. It'd be tough to make a case for any of those academic positions today. He left, I thought this was interesting, he left Berkeley in the 50s when the faculty were being asked to sign loyalty oaths. That was time for him to move on. Best known for his books Childhood and Society and The Life Cycle Completed. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his book called Gandhi's Truth. Now here's the big map, and we could spend lots of time thinking about this. I'm going to do very quickly, just because the implications of his theory I think are related to. So he talks about ages and stages. This was a lifespan theory, really pushed on the Freudian understandings in the earliest years. There's these developmental struggles that happen at each stage. It's how you manage and make your way through that developmental struggle that determines outcomes. This can look like a polarity, right? Basic trust versus basic mistrust. We're on either end of the continuum. Erikson actually didn't see it as a polarity. He saw it as this tension between the two. And how you negotiated that tension had implications for where you went. If we just look at infancy, so according to Erikson, the struggle is between basic trust versus basic mistrust. The task to achieve is attachment and bonding. The social relationship that's primary at that time is with parents. And that if you're successful, if the infant is successful during that phase in life, then the virtue that comes out of that is hope. And again, you can kind of see how that plays across. At the bottom, I have a quote by Joan Erickson, which is, I think, interesting. It's important to remember that conflict and tension are sources of growth, strength, and commitment. I think this is key to thinking about Erikson. That the conflict is what you get out of the conflict is what's important. And that was, I think, particularly interesting. And Scott emailed me or Facebooked me or something at one point and said, now, are you going to talk about 8 stages or 9? And I said, well, I think I only have time for 8. But Joan Erickson, and in their final book, talked about a 9th stage in old age as they reached an elevated age beyond the 64 years and felt like they needed to talk about even more. But I think what's interesting for us, again, is this notion of development across the lifespan. and that it doesn't just happen in early childhood, and that things that can happen later in life can have an implication on how those earlier experiences are experienced. If we believe in developmentally appropriate practice and the need for child development theory to inform our design and development, the work that all of you are doing, then we need to look at ourselves developmentally as well. So that's the nudge here for the next couple of minutes of my presentation. For Erikson, the marker of successful development, excuse me, catch up to myself here, is the extent to which a person wants to engage in changing and caring for their society so that it's a good place for coming generations. And you can decide where you are on this continuum in your own life, right? But I look around the room and I don't see anybody hanging out down here, right? Albert Einstein was someone that Erikson wrote about a lot, and seemed to me, as I went back and did some reading and thinking, to be someone he held up as an example of connecting childhood and creativity, of connecting brilliance and genius with early experience. He was perhaps his favorite person to talk about that with. And in the speech that I found from 1979, he talked a lot about Einstein. He said, "One can celebrate all at once a childhood leading to unique creativity and a man's singular understanding of what the link of childhood and maturity can mean." I think that's really a powerful idea, and I love the photo of Einstein, and I love his quote, "Life's like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you have to keep moving." Right? Erikson saw creativity as a basic urge. This is something that all humans had. He talked about Einstein's innate sense of wonder and how that kept his affinity for play and learning alive throughout his life, how his childhood had fostered his imagination, trust, and his intellect. And then he posed questions that I will bring from Erikson to all of us. Might it be that adults who are best able to play, to create through their work, are those who maintain a questioning curiosity and wonder? Good reflective question for all of you, right? Might the reason that you're in this room as a media creator be that you're able to do that? Do they keep their senses alive, trusting them and the observations that come from them? Interesting thoughts for all of us in the creative work that we're doing. Erikson called Einstein a childlike adult. He retained the quality of childlikeness as opposed to childishness ascribed only to rare persons in history. And the distinction for Erikson of childlikeness, right, the ability to keep that child inside you alive and have that child inform your thinking and your work is so important. Einstein's whole development confirms the vital importance of the right to play and the unique relationship between play and the development of creativity. Related to play, Erikson said, "The playing adult steps sideward into another reality. The playing child advances forward to new stages of mastery." And Fred Rogers, who studied with Erikson, said, "Play gives children a chance to practice what they are learning." I like those. And Erikson also talked about how the child plays, the adolescent is wild, the adult is a philosopher. So, in theory, we've reached the philosophical stage. Another quote. Oh, sorry. Somebody want to help me with this? No, so I'll keep talking. Should be an audio clip there. I'll read it if I have to, but it's so much more fun to hear him say it. Yeah, we're in. It's just getting.
I propose a theory that the child's play with toys is the infantile form of the human ability to deal with the experience by creating model situations and to master reality by experiment and planning. It is in certain phases of this work that the adult too projects past experience into dimensions which seem manageable. In the laboratory, on the stage, on the drawing board, and on the screen. which I added now. He relives the past and thus relieves leftover affects. In reconstructing the model situation, he redeems his failure and strengthens his hopes. He anticipates the future from the point of view of corrected and shared past.
Pretty powerful words.
Yeah.
And in the context of your work. So toys, for him now, we can substitute children's media and media experiences, right? But your ability to deal with experience by creating model situations, I love that. And to master reality by experiment and planning. Powerful ideas, 1979 to now, coming from Erikson. And I think the last sentence is again worth reflection for all of us. Anticipates the future from the point of view of collected and shared past. None of us got here today without coming from our own childhoods. If Piaget could write a theory of child development on an N of 2 study of his own 2 kids, we can certainly do an N of 1 study of our own childhood experience. If you don't hang out with kids, you do know one child really well. Right? At a minimum, you know one child really well. So tap into that kid if you're having trouble thinking, what would this be like? And I think that's really the message we're getting from Erikson. Now, to comply with Warren's request, I did create a quick collection of apps. It's not important, to be perfectly honest, what I grabbed. What's important was the thinking that I had behind it. Was just, if I'm talking about childlike creativity, what were some of my apps that I like around creativity and open-ended experiences for kids? So you can see them up there, and you can see that about partway to the 3rd row, we shifted to some creativity apps for adults, because I wanted to try to make the point about lifespan development and apps. So it isn't so much what apps I chose or how I did that to me is relevant for this morning. It's just this notion again of supporting creativity. So if Erikson had 8 developmental struggles, I would propose that we have 8 as well as children media producers. And so this is what I would put in front of you to think. And again, remember polarity, it's not either or. It's the tension between the two. So there's a tension between the virtual and the real. And having just come back from NAEYC, the people on the real side are saying we don't want anything to do with the virtual side, it isn't real, right? So that's an interesting challenge for us. It's plugged versus unplugged. Same group of people is saying go outside and play. Don't be sitting in front of a screen, right? So we've got that tension. Is it active or passive? Another tension. Is it interactions with people or interactive with the technology? When I talk about online learning, I talk about it has to be interactive with interactions. And in my field in early childhood education, educators want to learn in community. They want to learn with others, right? So an isolated experience that interactive on the technology is not going to be as rich as an experience where I can talk with others and really interact. Is it social, as in, are we bringing kids together or kids and adults together, or is it a solitary experience? Again, remember, I'm not suggesting that solitary is the evil and social is the holy grail, but is it one or the other, or can it be both? Is it multi-generational or age and stage specific? I think one of the things I'm most excited about in the last 2 years working with the Rogers Center is this idea of joint media engagement. Can we use technology to bring children and adults back together? Instead of, here, go take the iPhone, sit in the back seat and stay busy, can the iPhone app actually encourage me to sit down with my child and engage? There's a powerful opportunity here I think we ought to be thinking about. Are we talking about apps that get the kids to lean in, right, or lean back? Well, I'm a big lean in, lifespan learning person. I want experiences that people want to really lean in and get into. So we've got that. And then the last one, of course, has to do with multi-touch. Once we could swipe instead of type, we changed the game for young kids, right? But we still are confronted with that continuum. And then, of course, we wouldn't be here without this tension between is it magic or is it dust. So a couple of takeaways here on my thoughts about Erikson and the work that you're all doing. We need to embrace lifelong but also life-wide learning, because we have this rare opportunity because of technology to think about where we learn, how we learn, when we learn. Patrick was talking last night about the importance of really thinking about out-of-school experiences and how that implicates children and their learning, and I think that's exactly right. It's across life. We need to create technology tools that allow us to play and learn with anyone, anytime, in any place, at our own pace, on any device. And we can already do that, but doing it and making it happen and really connecting people, that's a big idea. And again, in my world in online learning, this is very powerful. I'm working with teachers who are working full-time in the classroom with young kids. They can't come to Erikson Institute and earn their master's degree during the day. I've got to create a different environment for that to happen. We need to leverage digital convergence, and the Swiss Army knife metaphor is obvious. But in a smartphone, you have living next to each other every media we've ever had in an individual device before. If we've got that kind of proximity, media proximity, what do we do with that? How do we take advantage of that? How do we ignite that? I think that's great. And Erikson talks about blatantly connecting childhood and creativity, understanding the two. And again, my nudge to all of you is this notion of keeping the child inside you alive. And I'm going to let a couple of favorite folks end this for me with some quotes. Maria Montessori said, "There's not an adult who was not made by the child he once was." My favorite quote for the rationale behind reflective practice. Why do we have teachers of young children become reflective practitioners? Because you need to understand your own past so that you can begin to understand the work of others and the experiences of the kids. Fred Rogers said, "The child is in me still, and sometimes not so still." I would like to encourage those of you who are in the development and creation of children's media to make sure the kid inside of you is never still. Never still. Let that child rummage around and have fun and play and explore and understand. That would be a great way to honor Fred's work, but also to keep that inner child going. And then we're going to really see if we get one more chance. Ah.
You were so close.
I know. I'll let you get it. I wanted to end where we began with Erikson's own words.
Girlfriend,
This is review.
Yeah. Just in case you didn't get it the first time. And this one, next one. Here
Here, little guy. Here's the little papa.
well, I do think I owe you somebody else's quote. And so let me add my favorite quotation, this one from William Blake, which blatantly connects childhood and creativity. He said, "The child's toys and the old man's reasons are the fruits of the two seasons." Thank you.
So I'll leave you with the number one question at Erikson Institute. Is it dust or magic? Well, it all depends. Thank you.
Thank you.